Spirit's been very clear with me that I'm not allowed to plan too much for these shows. Because I am OCD, and I
Yeah.
will spend money on every single one of my shows, and there will be no spontaneity, and they will be perfect. And I've been told not to do that. So
Yeah.
what Spirit has been really coming forward over the last couple of days, and it's been blaringly obvious with these repeated messages, is that we need to talk about the current environment of fear in the world, fear and loss, the fires that are going in Australia. There's so many things that are really dragging down the energy of the world. And if you focus on that energy, you lose sight of what's real. So that show is all about the divine matrix and how to escape this matrix of fear that we are living in. So we're going to tap into Spirit as much as we can and really talk about what this climate is doing to the world, what it appears to be doing, and how do we break free of that.
Love it.
Yes.
I love it.
Small feet. Not small feet at all. I get this question all the time from my family, who knows I'm into the spiritual world. They say, how do you feel about Trump? And how do you feel about politics? And I tell them that when you look at the political climate in the US and in Britain and Germany, if you look at it from a spiritual lens, you see the divine mission behind what's going on. That these things that seem so negative and so inhuman in so many ways are forcing us to look at the negative parts of ourselves, look at the darkness, and bring light to those areas. So I don't look at Trump and say, oh, I hate this man and yada, yada, yada. I don't go into those arguments because I see the divine mission that he's accomplishing. That all of them are accomplishing with this corruption. It's bringing light to these subjects.
Exactly. And you said something really critical there that I wanted to point out. When somebody asks you that question, that's kind of a sign right there. When somebody says, hey, because I get the same questions from my husband, and he's like, well, what do you think is going to happen? What do you think is going on? But like the question itself is rooted in fear, in their own lack of discernment or inability to discern or see past the illusion. So that alone tells me where they're at in terms of placement in the 3D matrix, in that 3D fabric. And your response is a great example of where you are located, right? You say, well, actually, fear has no room where I'm at, because if you see where I'm at in the fabric that I'm looking at, the illusions are not there. You're in a different fabric. You're in a different matrix. You may be looking in your external reality and seeing what's unfolding, but you don't really exist there. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's part of being a spiritual seeker is it's not, and I did a whole show on ascension and what it means to really ascend doesn't mean that you're no longer in the 3D world.
Correct.
You're always wanting to come back to the 3D world to teach and to bring light, but you're still aware of it. It's not affecting you the same way. It's not your main reality anymore.
Yes. You're playing a different game.
Yes.
You're quite literally playing a different game and playing a different rules based on frequency and vibration. You're not the same frequency and vibration as the person asking you that question. You don't have the same rules. And so therefore, while this stuff is still happening, it doesn't affect you in the same way it may affect them. Does that make sense?
Oh, absolutely.
It's like Spirit showing me this image. It's like walking through mud. They're walking through mud and they have their boots on and their boots are really muddy and they've been walking for a long time and they're tired. You know when you've been on a really long freaking hike and your legs just don't want to go? and then you get to mud and you're like, oh my God, how am I going to cross? There's a book, my kids read this book. It's can't go over it, you can't go under it, you have to go through it. Something about a bear. Can't go over it, but they walk through this mud flat. And you can't go over it, you can't go under it, you have to go through it. But they're trudging through the mud. But the difference is that you can swap out your boots for ice skates, by the way, and skate on this beautifully groomed ice rink. And so like you and I are skating on an ice rink while we're just in a different game. We're in a different game. a different fabric, which means we have different rules. And it really is all rooted in frequency. Where are you vibrating at? Where is your frequency at? If you are stuck in that fear and that density, I like to call it density because it feels very heavy. It feels like this stuff that just weighs you down. Fear, trauma, all the what ifs, all the things the media puts out, all the illusion. It's to keep you weighed down, keep you stuck, keep you walking through the mud. But if you and I, say, hey, here's a pair of ice skates. You want to come skate with us? It's much nicer over here. Like, it's really fun. You can twirl and dance. And I mean, you can see the people over there walking through the mud, like from where we're at, but you can also come join, like, you want a pair of ice skates?
And it's so funny, that image that puts in my mind. If you were given a choice, do you want to be trudging through the mud unhappy?
Say it, right? Like, that doesn't look very fun over there. That looks like hard work. I've been there. I know that's hard work. Like, I don't want that anymore. So here, we have endless ice skates, infinite. Grab a pair. Grab a pair. Come play. Like, and that's really the difference. And they're making light of it. They're making it fun and making it lighthearted, because really, as you get out of those lower, very oppressive types of things, fear is really the thing. If there's one label to give it all, it's really fear. And fear brings up not only ancestrally rooted trauma, things that are within very deeply, perhaps lineage, DNA, cellular level type stuff that people may not even be aware that they're holding on to or have even. But all these buttons get triggered on their little operator switchboard. All these buttons go off. And so it's but if you step back and you say, actually, this is not who I am. This is not who I am. And I know that, but how do I get out of that? Like, do you remember when we existed in primarily that 3D matrix, how difficult it was to see past the illusion? Because it feels very real. And it feels very real.
I remember I had 3 distinct stages in my spiritual journey. The first, before I woke up, was just depression and struggle, and every day felt like such a struggle for my career, a struggle to find love, a struggle for money, a struggle to take care of my condo. Just everything was a struggle. Then when I woke up, it was this wonderful lollipops and Candyland moment for a little while, that aha moment that's just powerful. And then that drift away to the reality of how hard and challenging life was, and that sucked me back down. Not necessarily to the 3D, but to this place where, why am I fighting so hard when I know that there's more to life than this? When I know my soul can go on, why am I fighting so hard in humanity? And then I came out of that, and that's where I am now, at the place where I see the intention of being here on this planet at this time. I understand why the struggles exist. I understand why I get to go through them, but instead of seeing them as challenges, I see them as opportunities. And a whole new level for me. And that one's just been within the last year.
Yes. Yeah. Well, and if we look at the game, if we look at it from a game standpoint, the mud, it's like Team Mud versus Team Ice Skates. I know, but it's funny. It's funny, but it's like, it sucks when you're on Team Mud, Team Muddy Boots. Like, that sucks. It's not fun. It's hard work. Things are hard. It is difficult. It is a challenge to move forward. It isn't as effortless as it just isn't, because there are all these, you're carrying gear and you're weighed down. And then over time, you're like, I don't really need that. And then you leave it on the trail, and then you I don't really need this either. And and then eventually you start taking the things that you realize were illusions or that you don't need, that you're a whole to begin with. But it's through showing, it's through that muddy trek is what shows you what to let go of. It's what shows you what you no longer need to carry. And sometimes that's a harsh reality. Sometimes that may be a bear's going to eat you, And you gotta like let it go now. Like, otherwise you are making it, right? I mean, like you can't outrun the bear if you're carrying this 50-pound back. So like my awakening happened in very similar stages. Very depressed. I was very depressed, wanted to die, went through that dark night of the soul, and that lasted for a while. That lasted for like years. And then all of a sudden I saw the light, and it was like, whoa. I'm like, oh my God, there it is. It exists. It exists, you know, but then I had children, and then I got sucked back down into that, because having babies is hard work.
Yeah.
And turns out sleep is like a necessity for me, but you know, it's kind of a needed thing. But in this process, all jokes aside, even the darkness, because the 3D is very dualistic in nature. It's not even polarity. It's like total duality, dark versus light. There's a battle, but you can't have one without the other. It's like a magnet. It's like a magnet isn't efficient without two pieces magnetizing together. So how do you know where you're at if one doesn't show you where you're at? It's like a mirror.
And the spirit was just telling me that thing that helps you reach that final stage, or the benefit of getting past that dark night of the soul, is you no longer feel alone, which is where so much of that pain and fear comes from, is you feel like you're suffering alone.
Yes.
Nobody understands you. Nobody can feel what you're going through.
Yes.
At some point when you learn that that's just wrong, that is just not true, you are never alone. That brings you to, that's what gives you your own pair of ice skates. And now you can start handing out ice skates to other people, because
Right?
It's a group sport.
It's a group sport. That's exactly it. It's like but in the moment when you're in the thick of it, and you're in that experience, you truly believe. And I had the same thing. I felt so alone. I felt like no one on this entire planet would understand me. No one. In that moment, that's how you feel. That is illusion, right? That couldn't be further from the truth. And so having experienced that, and then having also experienced the opposite side of the coin, and knowing now that we have an incredible network of spirit help, like incredible, but it's like there was a lid on it. There was a disconnect. That's the illusion. And so how does one, like, I'm just trying to think out loud, how does one shift that feeling of disconnect to connection, because they're just two sides of the same coin?
There's a meditation that I taught a couple months back, and it was on the balance of 3. So that polarity, that duality, that weight, that scale that you see that talks about being justice, one side or the other, is an illusion. There's no duality. There's actually, if you have the balance of 3 different powers, now you feel that connection. So I showed them how to open up to the above, to source, and as well as to earth, and then to themselves. So themselves being that 3rd power. And for me, that feeling is like a drug. It's addictive in its lovingness. It's, as soon as you get a taste for that, just pure love, and knowing that the above and the below is always with you, it makes you want it more. You're like, why wouldn't I go back to that? Why wouldn't I want to feel that way all the time? So it's not that you don't go through trials, but you will always have that feeling in the back of your mind saying that that was the reality. That's where I want to get.
Yes. Yes. Amen. Amen. Yeah. Well, in that is true. So I love that beautiful imagery of having the 3 and being connected. They actually showed me like a triangle, more of this triangular connection, or the Trinity, or just the power of 3, and having that be very, you're not escaping. It's not escapism. You're part of. You're very much an integral part of. You're like that middle ground. You're the middle that connects, that bridge. You're the bridge, really, is what you are between there and here. I mean, Gaia is a host. This earth is a host for us. under our feet to live on, but really we bridge the two. That's part of the cool thing about being in human form.
And that was what that, the end symbol on that show was the triangle, and it's spinning. There's no primary point in this. It doesn't matter. And the triangle is the most stable structure in sacred geometry. So if you look at that duality of, or that balance of three, and you connect with those, you're helping to heal Earth because you're allowing the energy of yourself, your love, to flow down. You're allowing the energy of Source to flow through you and down. And then vice versa. You're allowing Gaia's energy to stretch up to the heavens again.
It's beautiful.
Need each other. This is how we are whole. And whenever I feel that, it's instantaneous. It takes just a second to open up those two channels, allowing your heart to be that bridge. It's really your heart center that acts as that.
Yes.
And you can walk around in that all day. It's such a good feeling. It really is.
Speaking of that heart center, I was actually guided. Rose quartz keeps coming up today, and I was guided to pick this particular sweater, which is kind of the color of rose quartz. But the message they had been telling me all morning this morning was really about self-love. Like, yes, it's super important to know we're always connected, and shifting through and moving that illusion out of the way to realize, oh my God, yes, I'm connected, and I can connect at any time. It's accessible to me at any time. But self-love is radically important right now.
Yes.
And I mean, it's like dancing with yourself kind of love. It's not like, oh, I love myself and I love how I look today. No, this is like radical self-love of loving your flaws, loving your silliness, loving everything about yourself in every now moment while being connected to those points. And I feel like with everything going on in the world right now, that's a very important message. And that will really quickly shift you out of that fear, having that connection, being that triangle, but then also what they're showing me is like filling that triangle with self-love, or that pink color, even filling that up. Being gentle with yourself is radically important right now.
Yes. There's 7 steps in Ascension and Alchemy. And before you reach self-love, which is the 4th step, which coincides with the heart chakra, the fourth chakra, is the 3rd step, which is letting go, separating other people's thoughts from your thoughts. No longer taking outside thoughts as true, so that you can reach self-love. It's hard to reach self-love if you still believe what the world is saying around you. It's just bombarding you with this noise all the time. So it makes it very, very hard to focus on how wonderful and divine you really are. It's essentially deafening you with noise. So you have to separate what's the true, the falsehood from the matrix in order to reach that place of self-love. And I think that's one thing that is so hard to do when you're watching the media all the time, or onto these websites that you just hear. People are really activists are really doing what they think is best, but they're putting so much anger out in the world that it makes it hard for anybody to separate that from the reality of it.
Yes. And it's and yet what Spirit's telling me, because we talked about this before you hit record, is that even in the shakeup, and even in the anger, and even in the darkness, and even in all the stuff that's coming out and will come out, it's like even in all that angst, it's like very angsty feeling. There is so much. So I've got Yeshua here coming in, Jesus, and he says, for the amount of angstiness that you see and are feeling, there is 10 times more light coming. But it's like to see through the cracks. It's much more difficult to find the light coming through the cracks right now if you're very consumed in the media. And that was one of the first things that I found wasn't working for me. So I completely just stopped paying attention to the news or tuning into, like, being very mindful of what I consume informationally.
Yeah.
Whether that's online, through media, through YouTube, what I read, like being very intentional about what I put into my mind and into my energetic field ultimately. And a lot of times when you cut the stuff out, you tend to tune in more.
Yeah.
It actually helps your connection.